The trade station Varen's Rest hovered quietly over a small blue planet at the edge of the Coalition space. Its lights glimmered against the void like fireflies, drawing travelers from across the stars. Merchants, explorers, and refugees moved along its corridors, each carrying their stories and secrets. Most were careful to avoid drawing attention to themselves, especially when humans were involved. Humans were loud, unpredictable, and, according to some species, reckless. But they were also known for something else, something extraordinary that often left even the most skeptical aliens in awe. Eli Carter was not yet the kind of human people wrote stories about. He was 5 years old, with messy brown hair and bright, curious eyes that seemed to see everything, even the things most adults ignored. Tonight he was bundled in a worn jacket, clutching his favorite possession, a small blue blanket covered in stars and rockets. It had been with him on every shuttle ride, every evacuation, every long wait in the crowded stations of the Coalition. To Eli, it was more than a blanket. It was comfort, safety, and warmth in a universe that could feel overwhelmingly big. Tonight, however, the station was unusually cold. A power relay had failed, and the emergency heaters sputtered weakly. Travelers huddled in every available corner, shivering and complaining. Many species tolerated cold differently than humans, but the chill was sharp even for humans. For some, it was unbearable. In a quiet corner of the station, two small figures struggled against the cold. They were hatchlings of the Larathi species, tiny reptilian beings barely half a meter tall, with scales that reflected the dim light. Their skin, usually warm in the controlled environments of their home world, had become dangerously cold. They shivered and curled up tightly, their tiny limbs trembling. The foil covering them did little to protect them from the chill. Their guardian had gone to search for help, leaving them alone for a few minutes, a decision that could have cost them their lives. Eli noticed them immediately. He had been wandering the station, his blanket dragging behind him like a small comet. At first, he simply stared, unsure if the creatures would notice him. Then he stepped closer. The hatchlings looked fragile, shivering as their teeth chattered softly. Eli knelt down, tugging the blanket from around his own shoulders. "You're cold," he said simply, his voice small but firm. Without hesitation, he wrapped the blanket around both hatchlings. It was a snug fit, more human than reptilian in shape, but it covered them enough to shield them from the worst of the cold. The hatchlings' breathing slowed almost immediately. The warmth from the blanket, infused with the boy's own body heat, spread quickly, easing their shivers. One of the hatchlings, a tiny male, blinked at Eli with wide black eyes. The other, slightly larger and more cautious, slowly curled its tail around the first. They didn't speak. Larathi hatchlings were not born with the ability to talk, but they leaned into the blanket, seeking the comfort it offered. Eli sat beside them, humming softly. He had no idea why he did it. He had never been taught to share so selflessly. It just felt right. In that small act, he didn't see species differences or the chaos of the universe. He only saw two creatures in need. Minutes passed. The station's lights flickered again, reminding everyone of the failed heaters. Eli noticed his own lips trembling, but he didn't move. He couldn't take the blanket back. It belonged to the hatchlings now, at least for tonight. He shivered under his jacket, but found that the warmth from helping them, small as it was, made him feel stronger than the cold. When the Larathi guardian returned, Eli barely noticed. The adults' eyes widened as they took in the scene. Their hatchlings, usually noisy and fussy, were calm, almost asleep, wrapped in the human boy's blanket. The guardian's mouth opened, then closed again, unable to find words in a human tongue. Instead, they simply nodded, a gesture of gratitude before carefully lifting the hatchlings into their arms. Eli smiled faintly, then tugged the blanket back gently. He wasn't asking for it. It was his gift, and seeing the hatchlings safe was reward enough. The guardian, still silent, placed a small token in Eli's hand, a smooth, glowing crystal. In Larathi culture, it symbolized life debt, a promise to repay the kindness given. Eli didn't understand, but he held it tightly, feeling the warmth of another species' gratitude. By the time the station engineers restored power, Eli had wandered back to the corridor where his parents were waiting. They were busy arranging supplies and checking manifests, barely noticing him. Eli didn't mind. He didn't need praise. The hatchlings were safe. That was enough. Over the next few weeks, Eli would forget many things about Varen's Rest. The cold, the chaos, even the station's towering gates. But he would never forget the way the hatchlings had looked under his blanket, how their tiny bodies had relaxed, how the warmth of a small human hand had made a difference. The Larathi Guardian never forgot either. In their culture, a life saved could not be repaid immediately. It could only be remembered, nurtured, and eventually returned. And they remembered Eli Carter, the small human boy with a big heart, as the one who had given warmth when no one else could. For the humans around him, Eli was just a quiet child, slightly smaller than his peers, with an unusual sense of empathy. But in the Larathi's eyes, he had become a legend, a being worthy of trust and loyalty beyond measure. They watched him grow from afar, tracking his travels through the coalition systems, waiting for the day when their debt could be repaid. Eli didn't know it yet, but the small act of sharing his blanket had set in motion a chain of events that would ripple across galaxies. His kindness would be remembered, not just in whispers or logs, but in the actions of beings who owed their lives to him. That night, as Eli curled under a new blanket of his own aboard the shuttle back to his homeworld, he felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. The stars outside the viewport seemed brighter, almost alive. Somewhere far away, the hatchlings slept safely, and that thought made the universe feel a little smaller, a little warmer, and a little more full of hope. And in that moment, the boy who had shared a blanket did not need to know the future. He had already made it better for 2 lives, and perhaps unknowingly, for many more to come. Years passed, and Eli Carter grew from a small boy with a big heart into a capable young man. The shuttle rides, crowded stations, and endless waiting had shaped him, but nothing had changed the essence of who he was, a human who cared. By the time he reached his 20s, Eli was not just a traveler. He was a commander in the United Nations Space Service. His decisions now could save hundreds, even thousands of lives. And yet he had never forgotten the 2 tiny Larathi hatchlings who had once shivered beneath his blanket. He often thought about them when reviewing station logs or listening to old stories from his parents. At the time, it had been a simple act, just a blanket and a small gesture of kindness. But in the universe, simple acts often grew larger than anyone expected. Now Eli found himself commanding the UNSS Venture, a mid-sized frigate tasked with protecting a frontier colony on the edge of human space. The colony had been attacked by a rogue fleet of synthetic ships, machines built for destruction with no compassion, no mercy, and no pause. The humans stationed there were cornered. Supplies were low, shields failing, and escape routes closing. Every officer aboard the Venture knew the odds were stacked against them. Eli stood on the bridge, staring at the dark expanse ahead. The stars were beautiful, but tonight they felt indifferent. His crew was tense, some whispering about surrender, others praying. Eli, however, was calm. He had faced danger before, and he trusted in human resilience, something the galaxy often underestimated. Suddenly, the sensors picked up movement. At first it was faint, almost indistinguishable from background noise. Then the readings cleared. Dozens of vessels, unlike anything human or coalition standard. They shimmered in the void, their hulls sleek and glimmering almost like living scales. Energy signatures flared across the bridge monitors, each one pulsing with a controlled, measured power. The synthetic fleet was advancing. Shields at 60%, reported Lieutenant Mira. They're faster than predicted. We don't have enough firepower to hold them off. Eli's gaze remained steady. Hold formation. Prepare for boarding protocols if necessary, but don't fire unless I give the order. Watch and wait. The crew exchanged puzzled looks. Eli's patience in the face of overwhelming odds unnerved them. But he had learned something long ago. Sometimes survival required more than strength. It required faith, and humans had that in abundance. Then, without warning, the void shimmered in a pattern that made every human on the bridge pause. From hyperspace, dozens of Larathi vessels emerged. They were massive, elegant, and armed, but their formation spoke more of precision than aggression. The fleet moved like a single living organism, circling the Venture and the besieged colony. The communications console crackled. A voice came through, accented but clear, using Galactic Common, the universal language of diplomacy. To the descendants of the Blanket Giver, the message began. Every human on the bridge froze. Eli's heart skipped a beat. He knew that phrase. He had heard stories from his parents, and now it echoed in reality. The Larathi offer repayment of our life debt. Your courage and compassion were recorded and never forgotten. Eli's mind raced. The hatchlings he had helped so long ago, now grown, now leaders of a mighty fleet, had remembered him. They had watched from afar, waited, and now returned with power that even the synthetic fleet could not match. The Larathi ships advanced, their energy weapons pointed at the synthetic ships. Within moments, the rogue machines were caught in coordinated beams that disabled propulsion, weapons, and communication. Explosions flashed, but the Larathi avoided destruction wherever possible, focusing on containment and neutralization. The humans watched in awe. Years of training and technology had prepared them for many battles, but nothing like this. Commander Carter, Lieutenant Mira whispered. They're saving us. Eli nodded slowly. His eyes scanned the bridge, resting for a moment on the viewports that framed the Larathi fleet. They are, he said, because someone once showed them kindness. The synthetic fleet, unprepared for such precise and humane intervention, quickly surrendered. The Larathi did not destroy them unnecessarily. Instead, they disabled the rogue vessels and escorted them into containment fields. Within minutes, the colony was safe, the humans unharmed, and the rogue fleet neutralized. Then a single vessel detached from the main Larathi formation. Its design was more intricate, almost ceremonial. A boarding shuttle extended, docking with the Venture. Eli watched as a group of tall Larathi stepped onto his bridge. They were majestic, their scales shimmering in colors that seemed impossible, eyes reflecting intelligence and gratitude. Among them, he recognized two figures, the hatchlings he had once warmed with his blanket, now fully grown and commanding the Larathi fleet. You saved our lives once, one of them said, their voice calm but carrying authority. We have waited for the moment to repay the debt. Tonight your people live because of that act. We are honored to serve you, even if only in gratitude. Eli felt a warmth that no human technology could replicate. I only gave them a blanket, he said softly. It wasn't much. The Larathi smiled, a gesture that seemed almost human in its emotion. To you, perhaps. To us, it was life itself. A single act of kindness can ripple across the stars. We have learned from you that life is worth protecting, and we will do so in your name. The rest of the night passed in organized relief. The colony was secured, wounded humans assisted, and essential supplies restored. Throughout it all, Eli witnessed something profound. The universe often spoke in numbers, power, and dominance, but sometimes it answered in kindness returned, debts repaid, and courage acknowledged. Later, when the press arrived to record the story, reporters asked Eli what he thought of the Larathi arrival. He smiled, thinking of the tiny hatchlings under his blanket so many years ago. Guess it's true what Mom used to say, he said quietly. No good deed ever gets cold. Across the coalition and human space, that phrase quickly became more than a saying. It became a story, a legend, and a reminder that humanity had a quality no other species could claim fully. The ability to act with courage, empathy, and warmth in even the coldest corners of the galaxy. As the Larathi fleet prepared to depart, Eli watched them leave, knowing their paths would cross again someday. He thought of the hatchlings, now leaders, now friends, and he felt a profound connection to the galaxy around him. The universe was vast, often unforgiving and sometimes indifferent. Yet in one corner of it, a simple human heart had changed the course of countless lives. And in that truth, Eli Carter found hope, purpose, and the knowledge that kindness, however small, could become a force stronger than fleets, stronger than technology, and stronger than fear itself. From that day on, humans across the galaxy told the story of the boy who gave his blanket and the life debt that returned in a fleet of shimmering Larathi ships. It reminded everyone that even the smallest acts could resonate across years, across systems, and across generations. And somewhere in the vastness of space, two Larathi leaders looked back at the human boy who had grown into a man, and they remembered the night when warmth saved them, the night when a 5-year-old simple act had created a bond that no distance, no time, and no challenge could ever break.